fantasy creatures, which can be a lot of fun for those that don't even know baseball, don't even know fantasy sports. But if you do follow baseball and follow football, we have lots of really fun hidden elements in the game. For instance, the names of the characters. We give winks to a lot of famous pro players. Some of the poses and imagery might be familiar from, say, vintage baseball cards and so on. So we've done a lot of fun stuff like that in both the games. And the difference between the two is fantasy baseball has a head-to-head element, but also a rotisserie baseball element, while fantasy football, it's a different experience, right? You're facing someone else week to week. You have to worry about bye weeks. You have to worry about players in different positions. You have to worry about weather. So each game has its similarities, but they have their uniqueness based on their particular fantasy sport. So all in all, it's fantasy sports, but in a fantastical type of a world.
Yeah, and that is creative. When I first seen the title of it, of course, it kind of caught my eye because I'm like, okay, I know fantasy baseball, I know fantasy football, but fantasy baseball or football, I was very, very intrigued by it, and I think that is great. I mean, that's how you're going to get people, I think, to see it and get people intrigued and interested in it. So, man, hats off to you and also CSE Games. Once again, we're talking to Fabio Del Rio. So you broke down the games. You talked about the different games, the different types of games. Where can everybody buy it, and what are kind of the price ranges for most of the games?
Sure. One thing I have to mention, though, just to go back one step to the fantasy sports line, is first of all, the inspiration from the game you're going to love. It came from one of those kind of phony motivational posters that you've probably seen as memes on the internet. And it basically showed a picture of a bunch of guys in a room writing down a piece of paper, and it basically said, fantasy sports. It's Dungeons and Dragons for jocks. And that was the inspiration of the game, because it's so true, right? Like, right. Even if us sports fans, we're geeks big time in what we do. Like, the amount of time we spend on fantasy sports, going through rosters, playing the odds, who am I going to sit this week? Who am I going to play? That's very, very gamerly. And the two designers who I have to mention, one is a gentleman from Fort Worth, Texas, named J.R. Honeycutt. He's a well-known designer and has been in the industry for quite a few years and has an amazing baseball name. And the other is Daryl Andrews. Yeah, isn't that good? J.R. Honeycutt and Daryl Andrews are the two designers. Great baseball names, and those are the two guys that came up with the concept and have developed it. But I just wanted to make sure to mention the true inspiration was this poster that this meme that they saw on the internet. But now to go back to your other question, our stuff you can go to CSEgames.com, Charlie Sierra Echo Games.com, for those that go by the, I guess you call it phonetic alphabet or something like that. But yeah,
military alphabet. Yeah,
there you go, military alphabet. Yes. So yeah, we the fantasy sports games sell for $29.99 US, and you can go to the website, get all kinds of information. We'll have links to retailers. We like to support the stores and retailers that carry our products. You can find a lot of our stuff on Amazon as well. With Black Friday coming up, might be a good time to take advantage of some Prime free shipping. Fantasy baseball is out now, and fantasy football will be out early next year. we're looking forward to that one. We've had a lot of interest. The football community has really taken to it, and we're excited for that one to be out. But for those who are fans of more casual type card games or puzzle type games, we've got quite a variety. If you're a sports fan or not, we have a nice variety of family-friendly games that can be that have a very inclusive feeling. Anyone can kind of jump in, and they're not overly intimidating games, but they're easy games to learn with nice depth to them.
Yeah, awesome. And I've been on the website, like I've said plenty of times, so I'm definitely going to purchase one of these amazing games. One other thing I did want to touch on, there's a category on there called awards. You got Creative Child Magazine, Major Fun Award, a lot of different variety of awards on there. Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, this is a really great part of the industry. Is there's great individuals and groups that do a lot of in-depth reviews of games. You go from individuals that focus on the parenting side. There's a group called Father Geek, and he has a really interesting way of reviewing his games. He does 3 levels. He rates it for his geek friends, his gamer friends. Then he'll rate it with his parent friends, and then he'll rate it for kids. So he'll almost have these 3 levels of approval, which is really nice. And that's a very specific way of rating things, right? He specifically touches on the quality of the components, educational value, engagement, and so on. And then you have something at a much bigger scope, the American Mensa Award. And we were lucky enough to get on their recommended list a few years back for one of our games called Cortex. It's kind of a nice tile-laying puzzle game. And for the American Mensa Award, you send them copies of your games with instructions, and they actually have a weekend-long event where Mensa members, so people who are actually in that 95th percentile, will actually be playing your games and do an individual evaluation. And based on all the feedback that they receive on all the games that are submitted, they give awards for ones that are called the Mensa Select Award, which is their top tier. And then they have a second tier of recommended games that they also include. And like I said, we were lucky enough to get a great recommendation for our game Cortex a few years back. But yeah, it's just a really good way of getting for parents or for people that are new to the game world. They'll get a good idea of what the game's about, because a lot of these awards, they don't just hand them out because you pay them some money. In fact, most cases they don't charge money. They really only give the seal if they really like your game. So we always are weary of those who charge a fair bit of money for their awards, because you don't want to be buying an award, you want to be earning it. And in virtually all cases, these awards, there's either a very small administrative amount, or they're free for evaluation. And those awards mean a lot to us. They've it's taken us quite a few years to earn a lot of these awards, but they mean a lot, and they definitely mean a lot when the customers see them on your box.
Definitely. I think that'll draw customers in for sure, and there is a variety of awards on there. Once again, we're talking to Fabio Del Rio of CSE Games, and I want to thank you for coming on the show. Before I let you go, what are the teams that you follow? Of course, this is a sports show, so I'll talk a variety of sports, but I wanted to just know what teams you follow and how are your teams doing, by the way.
Yeah, I was waiting for this part of the chat.
Oh yeah.
So my football team is the Denver Broncos. So I still have the post Super Bowl glow, and even though the Broncos don't have a quarterback now and apparently don't have a defense anymore, I can still, hang my head up high with the Super Bowl we recently won. In basketball, so our company, as I mentioned, we're just outside Toronto. I grew up a Laker fan. I grew up in Ottawa, Ontario, the capital. And this, I started following basketball in the early 80s, like right at the heart of Lakers Celtics. And for whatever reason, the Lakers were my team. Showtime to me was everything. And, I was upset when Michael Jordan won his first title and beat Magic and the boys. But since I've been, living in this area for probably 20 years now, I do have an affinity for the Raptors. I mean, it was fairly easy with the Vinsanity in the early 2000s, but, I definitely, I'm not a big believer I absolutely don't believe in switching your allegiances, but if you move to a town or you live in a town where a new team comes in, then I'm okay with that. So that's how I justify it. In baseball, I grew up a Mets fan, and again, I really got heavily into sports in the early '80s. So that was the time of Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden, leading into the '86 World Series, all that good stuff. And again, now being in the Toronto area, one of my very best friends is actually the assistant GM of the Toronto Blue Jays, and he gave me a bit of an ultimatum. And he said, if the Mets and the Jays faced off in the World Series, who would you root for? And so he really put me on the spot. It's a very good question. And basically I said to him, look, if you let me wear your World Series ring for a day, if you win, then I'll root for the Jays. So I figured that's not bad.
Yeah, no, it's not bad at all.
I figured. So where are we? So we're down to hockey. Well, I grew up, like I said, in Ottawa, Ontario, and we got the Ottawa Senators in the early '90s. And before that, I was an Edmonton Oilers fan. That was the heyday of Gretzky and Messier. And when I started watching hockey, the big thing was, is there a team that can get the cup back to Canada? Because the New York Islanders had won 4 years in a row. And Gretzky was, 19, 20 years old. Messier was 22 years old. They had this unbelievable team. And they did, and, they won 3 out of 3 cups in 4 years. But then, when we got the Ottawa Senators, it was a quick switch. And been an Ottawa Senators fan ever since. Leading me to my Canadian Football League favorite team, which is the new Ottawa Red Blacks, who had won the Grey Cup the year before. And for those that aren't familiar with the Canadian Football League, if you're a fan of college football, it's a fun league to check out. There are a lot of former big-time college football players that just couldn't crack the NFL that are in the league. And being that there are 3 downs instead of 4, it's a high-octane league. There is a lot of offense because, you got to get those 10 yards in 3 downs. So there's a lot of passing. It's a bigger field and a very exciting product. And especially in July, August, and September, before the NFL season starts, it's great football to watch. And I believe they show it on ESPN2 and definitely on ESPN3, which is the web-based ESPN, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
so those are my teams in the 4 major sports. Are you a Texas Dallas guy through and through?
I definitely am. I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm a Mavs fan. I'm a Rangers fan.
Nice.
I'm a Stars fan as well. So pretty much Dallas through and through, except college. I'm a North Carolina fan. Most of my family's from there. But I was very interested to hear that you started off a Lakers fan and went to the Raptors. But now I understand why. But when I read that, when you sent that to me, I was thinking, how does that correlate from LA to to Canada, but I get it. I get it now. I mean, I started off.
Yeah.